Go ahead and get started. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Lisa Roberts, and as of 2 days ago, I'm honored to officially serve as the immediate past president of the Westchester Jewish Council. Thank you all for joining us today for this informal conversation. We are grateful for our ongoing partnership with the county executive and his professional team, and we greatly appreciate his time today. We're also grateful for the presence of Deputy County Executive Ken Jenkins and so many of our elected officials who are joining us now, including Nancy Barr and Terry Clements from the County Board of Legislators. I see someone registered from the New York State Senator Shelley Mayer's office. Not sure if Shelley's with us, but welcome. Gary Brown and Allison Spindell from the New York State Attorney General's office. Victoria Presser and Justin Brash from the White Plains City Council. I see Marty Rogowski, former member of the Westchester County Board of Legislators and WJC board member. And I believe Arnie Linhart is with us. He's the chair of the Westchester Jewish Council's Government Relations Committee. And we also thank members of our county executive staff who are joining us on the call and have made this possible. If I've missed anyone, please feel free to put your name in the chat and I will acknowledge you then. The relationships that the council has built over time with our elected officials have enabled important and ongoing two-way communication that is both relevant and beneficial to our Jewish community. May is known as Jewish History and Heritage Month, and normally we would have commemorated it with the County Board of Legislators and with the county executive, as we have done annually for years. We are optimistic that we will finally be able to return and resume this practice next year. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. All attendees at this briefing have been muted. I suggest using the speaker view setting at the top right corner of your screen so that you can see our speaker in a large box. And after George's welcome remarks, I will moderate a conversation with both some pre-submitted questions and ask you to please use the chat function to pose your own questions. The county executive will answer as many as he can within our time frame. And just a reminder that we are recording this conversation. It is now my privilege to introduce Rabbi Howard Goldsmith, Rabbi of Congregation Emmanuel of Westchester and President of the Westchester Board of Rabbis, for a Devar Torah.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be with everyone today. In the Torah portion this week, Baha'alotcha, Moses prays for healing. Miriam has fallen ill, and all of the people are worried. They're afraid because they need her to help them find water. They're afraid because leadership like Miriam's is so important. They're fearful because she has been struck ill due to evil speech that she used against her brother Moses. And we can imagine that they're afraid from worry that her illness might spread to others. For all of those reasons and from love for his sister, Moses prays, El na rafana la, please God, heal her. The Jewish community in Westchester can relate to this episode from the Torah in so many ways. Like our neighbors, we know what it is to fear illness. COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on us all. We've lost dear members of our congregations, and we've seen everyone in Westchester and beyond suffer. Now that we are turning the corner of this challenging chapter, we look to the county's leaders as our ancestors looked to Moses to help guide our county back to health and prosperity. Like the ancient Israelites, we are also living in fear because of evil speech. The sickness this time is not a punishment from God due to malicious gossip. The sickness this time is anti-Semitism, stoked by internet memes and misinformation spread about Israel and about Jews due to Israel's recent defensive war against Hamas rocket attacks. Anti-Semitism is the world's oldest hatred, like a virus that recurs in times of stress. We are blessed to live in a county whose strong support we can count on. And still, we look to our county leadership as our ancestors looked to Moses to help us foster a commitment to dialogue, security, and cooperation in face of the virus of anti-Semitism. In the Torah, Miriam finds healing, and the people are able to carry on and ultimately find their way to the promised land. We look forward to continuing our long partnership with you, County Executive Latimer, with you and with all of the leadership of our county. We know that through that partnership, through that commitment to all of the citizens of Westchester, that we can overcome the ills of this moment and strive towards a future of promise. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will.
Thank you so much, Rabbi, for your thoughtful and wise words. And now it is my privilege to introduce our county executive, George Latimer. George is no stranger to the council, and this audience is surely aware of his impressive bio. George has served as a city councilman, county legislator, New York State Assemblyman, and New York State Senator. As our county executive, George has been a steadfast friend to the Jewish community, one whose leadership we know we can depend on, and I'm delighted to turn the meeting over to him now.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and thank you all for taking some time out of your day. We'll share some ideas together, and I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you, Rabbi, for your words of wisdom, and we've had the great fortune to have Howard with us at a number of our public events to share his wisdom and his tapping into the religious traditions of Judaism, and we all benefit from it. So we thank you, and thank you for being here. I do want to recognize, in one case, re-recognize our Deputy County Executive, Ken Jenkins, my partner in all of this, 1 and 1A. You bought one, you got two, and hopefully that's been helpful over the course of these 4 years. And I'm also joined on this by Rabbi Schlaff, who's part of our administration. She's the head of the Office for Women. We have Shari Rosen Asher, who is Director of Policy and Programs, and she does a lot of outreach with our small business efforts to chambers of commerce and other areas. And although not part of the administration as an appointed official inside the administration, but Marty Rogowski, who I served with on the Westchester County Board of Legislators. He's been an advisor and a friend over a long period of time. And you have to have friends who'll tell you sometimes what you don't want to hear. And Marty has that capacity to be a good friend in that regard. And he just agreed to serve on the Parks Board. So we're very happy to have his wisdom and so many others, so many friends on this Zoom that have already been announced. Obviously, everything that we talk about today is within the overlay of what's happened in the Middle East. And even when we talk about Westchester, whether we're talking about how we handle anti-Semitism in this county, how we handle the COVID outbreak in this county, we understand that we are in a blessed situation. I've had 2 opportunities to travel to Israel in 2005 and then again in 2006. And when I returned and I spoke to some of my non-Jewish friends, and they said, what was it like? And I said, you understand that they're in a completely different environment than we are here in Westchester County. In Westchester County, in comparison, we're in Nevada, Israel, roughly the size of the state of New Jersey. And they have enemies in Delaware, they have enemies in Pennsylvania, they have enemies in New York, and they have enemies offshore in the Atlantic Ocean. And then there's some enemies in parts within the boundaries of New Jersey. I said, and yet they live and they thrive, and they create out of a desert, a society, and a society that's shown great progress. And we can't talk about the Jewish community in Westchester without recognizing that what's happening in Israel is far and away the most dominant thing on people's minds. Yet, I'm not a federal official, I'm a county official, and there are things that we can and must do to make sure that the Jewish community in Westchester County feels secure and feels as if there's a real brotherhood amongst each other. I have asked folks to try to describe what was happening in Germany as their parents or grandparents related to them in the rise of Nazism, and how people who were friends and neighbors turned on their friends and neighbors because they were Jewish. People who had fought alongside each other in the First World War now turned on them as the enemy, domestic enemies. And may our American experience never experience that level of betrayal, where people would feel unwelcomed in their own home. Westchester is home to all of us. It's a big mosaic, lots of different people contributing to the society, The Jewish contribution in this county is incalculable. And hopefully we'll find ways to make this a better county, and we'll stand by our brothers and sisters around the world. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity to try to address any issues that you have, Lisa.
Thank you so much, George. We have a few questions that were pre-submitted, but just as a reminder to this audience, please submit any questions that you have using the chat function. So let's stay on the subject of anti-Semitism for a few moments. And obviously we all know that while anti-Semitism is not new, the recent spike in violence between Israel and Hamas has fueled alarming rise of anti-Semitic incidents, including here in New York. I actually read today that anti-Semitic incidents have increased by 63% in the US since May 10th. Can you remark on anything that's going on here on the local level, including any incidents and efforts within the county to combat it?
Well, I think the first and most important thing is that our administration, when we came into office 3.5 years ago, understood without even seeing the full impact of what was happening in the society. And there has been movement in this society, our American society, in the last 4 years that has made hatred more acceptable to express publicly in a variety of different ways. That we knew that we needed a more robust Human Rights Commission to perform the functions that it was originally intended. I was on the Board of Legislators. I was the chairman of the Board of Legislators 22 years ago when Andrea Stewart Cousins and Lois Bronze were the intellectual and emotional parents of the Human Rights Commission as was originally structured. And the support of the Jewish community was critical in getting that passed at the time. It's hard to imagine that anti-discrimination legislation would be so controversial. It was then, but in passing it, we felt that the HRC had not been run with vigor and energy. So we reconstructed the commission and we reconstructed the work staff, and we have tasked them, and they have more than responded to try to be present, working with local human rights commissions and working with local organizations to push back every time there is some incident of anti-Semitism. The annual Yom HaShoah event that we have out here, the Garden of Remembrance, which sits right outside my front window, 9 floors down, is a singular event. But we needed to do more than that as a county government. We needed to have ongoing efforts. And I think Tejas Sanchala and the team that he has there is trying to do more of that so that we both educate and highlight, the things that would be necessary to push back against anti-Semitism. And I might add, the spirit that's been let loose in the society these 4 or 5 years also shows anti-Asian and anti-Black and anti-Latinx and anti-gay and a host of different things. It's almost as if you opened up, the doors to some closet full of things that are now acceptable in the public domain. And the tools of social media and the tools of some, established media outlets that, in the name of free speech, really encourage that type of thing, I think has contributed to a more coarse climate. So from a county standpoint, Human Rights Commission, public education, and a much more aggressive way to bring us together in joint activities. Our County Department of Public Safety, and I think your leadership knows this, Elliot Forchheimer is always active in these things. We try to make sure that our police department and the other police departments are ready for the obvious activities, the High Holy Days and Passover and so forth, so that we have a physical presence to assist in the security that synagogues need and the Jewish community needs in order to function, to have the celebrations and the traditions expressed properly. And with all of those things, to move immediately whenever there's an incident. If there's a swastika on a stop sign or something scrawled on an abutment on a bridge along the Bronx River Parkway, that we move immediately to identify who may have done it, if we can identify that, to make sure that there's no sweeping it under the rug. And I think that helps. But I do think that things that have happened in the society move faster than what local governments can do. And right now there is, as I said before, a coarseness in the society that has been created over the last number of years, and it's going to take constant effort to try to right that ship from where it is.
Thank you. I was actually going to ask you about how we've worked to strengthen the the role of the Human Rights Commission, which is critical in this work. I know you're also coordinating work with the District Attorney's Office and the Speak Up Westchester. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I think our new district attorney, Mimi Roca, is an important leader in this area, and she has prioritized, through the hashtag Speak Up Westchester campaign, a coordination between her office and our offices. Obviously, a district attorney prosecutes criminal behavior, and working with administrative functions where we deal with behavior that might not reach criminality, but is certainly objectionable in the society. And that's where that working relationship is important. And then also to investigate the crimes and to investigate them, from 30 years of watching Law and Order, so that the crimes can be both, people can be brought to justice and then prosecuted effectively. Because we forget many times, if we don't do the law enforcement piece effectively, the prosecutors are unable to mete out justice before the courts. So Mimi's leadership on this has been very good. And I think it's something to note. My friend David Alpert is on the call here, and he and I have known each other for a long, long time. We've been active in the politics of Westchester County. Mimi Roca is the first member of my political party to be elected to countywide office who is Jewish. And there was a time in Westchester County that, you didn't know if that could happen politically. Now you've had Nita Lowy, Elliot Engel serve in large portions of the county as members of Congress and other successful individuals, to Ottinger and so forth. But for one of the three major positions, county executive, county clerk, and district attorney, her victory was a notable victory. And I think it's a sign that politically Westchester continues to move in a more open way where people can compete for office and not worry about the ethnicity. But going back to the work at hand, she's starting to work her programs together. I think you're going to see more cooperative efforts through the Human Rights Commission. And by the way, through our other offices. I mentioned Rabbi with the Office of Women. We have Dr. Damia Harris-Madden, who heads up our youth bureau.
Wait a second, let me call you back.
So the youth bureau and with some of the other offices that we have that deal with very specific elements of this situation, that there's cooperation there as well. And where we see, prejudice, again, that we immediately come back with a response, public response, and then in addition to that, a public education response, so that we show that we don't tolerate it, we don't accept it, we don't snicker behind the back, we push back on it immediately, even in the least little thing. These aren't kids' pranks, we don't treat it like that. We treat it as serious statements that we want to counter-argue right away.
Thank you. Our friend Arnie Linhart is asking if you think that the reporting process of hate crimes and incidents needs to be revised, as not all municipalities and police departments report.
Well, we just finished a study, police report, police reform and reimagining task force. We actually had appointed a task force right after the murder of George Floyd, which happened almost a year ago to the day. And then the governor, within 10 days or so, issued a mandate for everybody to do something like that. And that report had very specific recommendations. And one of the recommendations, Lisa, that was very appreciated was to make sure that we had in every police department in this county at least one officer who was trained to deal with hate crimes, and that person could liaise with the county police and other departments to be able to deal with hate crimes as they arise. I grew up in this county, and I grew up on the south side of Mount Vernon. I was a white kid in what was almost completely an African-American neighborhood. And without, being specific, hate crimes were minimized when I was a kid growing up. It was kind of like, that's, just kind of get over it. People say things, and, if they didn't do anything physical to you, it wasn't really a big deal. And none of it was ever directed at me, but I saw it. And I think that's the exact opposite of where we are now. I think we're at the point where we know that in every police department, hate crimes have to be taken as what they are. They're crimes, and they're taken seriously. And to that extent, the recommendation to have a liaison officer in every police department is essential, so that even in a very small department, maybe you don't have many incidents of it, but an incident could occur anywhere. And if it does occur in that particular location, that somebody's trained to respond to it, and then we at the county level can help support that with our public safety presence.
That's great. Obviously, many of our listeners are rightfully concerned about synagogue and agency, our JCC's security, some of which is being aided by local law enforcement, some by the Community Security Initiative that's funded by UJA Federation. We have Bill Hayes as our regional security manager here in Westchester, who's already been very valuable to many of our member organizations. We have the Community Security Service, which is volunteers who step up and provide security assistance to the professionals. And then in addition, the council, does a lot of work with interfaith and intergroup partners, trying to make sure that we have allies out there in the community who can stand with us against anti-Semitism. Do you think that there are other steps that we as a community can be taking?
Well, I think there are, and let me just tie into my own experience. I see one of my former bosses is on the video here, Lisa Goldberg, and Lisa was temple administrator at Community Synagogue in Rye during a period of time where I spent 10 years doing press for Community Synagogue. And I must tell you, as an aside, it was terrific because I learned about Simchat Torah and Esther Spiel and a lot of things that the Catholic boy down the block would not normally know. And it gave me a lot of street cred with some of my friends, including some of my Jewish friends who were not observant. I could always tell them something that they didn't know because they hadn't been to shul lately. But when I reported to Lisa back in the day, I had sort of a free range opportunity to come in and do the press work I had on my spare time because I was in public office and I had other responsibilities. And I'd go into the synagogue late at night and I had the codes necessary to get into the office to sit there and bang out the press releases or whatever things were happening. And I began to realize just on a personal level how vulnerable you can feel in a situation. I was there during the period of time when hostilities began in 2006 in Israel, when Hezbollah and Hamas were shooting rockets into Kiryat Shmona on the north and Sderot in the south. And then all of a sudden there was the concern. I'm in the synagogue by myself at night, and it doesn't matter that I am or am not Jewish. I'm there, and if somebody wants to make a localized statement of hatred, as they did in Squirrel Hill, as they did in San Diego, Poway, California, that kind of hatred doesn't stop with dotted lines of who is this person and are they really the target I want. They express their anger, their hatred with murder. So yeah, there is more we can do in order for every one of those people, whether they're at a major event or just working in the office or doing work in and around a synagogue, to feel safer. I think what it comes down to is probably the physical logistics of each synagogue. And I think working with Bill, who's a professional at these things, that our local police in each of the different communities, Westchester County Police does do the local policing in Mount Kisco, and we do a share of it in Cortland. So the synagogues that may exist in those areas, we're directly involved. But with the local, the Harrison Police, Rye City, and the other ones all across the county, that we can do a renewed effort to sit down and plot out what would be the best practices and where we need to have where we need to have additional cameras, and not maybe just cameras on site, cameras in proximity to the synagogue. So if somebody did something and they were then escaping to avoid detection, that they would be detected down the street and around the corner off the synagogue property, but that there would be some ability to do that. We have plate readers around the county and the county police, and so we can play a role in those things. But I think there are additional things. I'll let the professionals, Lisa, determine what those things are. If it involves allocation of resources from the county, we're certainly prepared to do those things and do it in concert with professionals who advise us. If you can do these things, this would make it much more likely that you could deter an act against the synagogue or any place. It doesn't have to be a synagogue. It could be a community center that doesn't have religious services in it, but is identifiable with the Jewish community.
Thank you. Lisa Goldberg used to be my boss as well. She was the assistant executive director at the Rosenthal JCC, where I worked for 24 years. So nice to see you, Lisa. Alan Grafman has a question. He says that we have it quite good here in Westchester and wonders if you're able to speak with other county executives throughout New York State on this topic and maybe give us a little bit of insight into what is going on in other parts of the state.
Well, I have the closest relationship with county executives of similar sized counties. And I would say that Laura Curran, my counterpart in Nassau County, is extremely focused on issues like this. We chat about this, and the Nassau County Jewish community is a significant community. Some of you all grew up on Long Island. I have some folks here who grew up on Long Island. And I think in Nassau County and Suffolk County, there's some pretty robust efforts. I think the smaller the jurisdiction you get to in upstate New York, the harder it is for them to have resources. They may not have the same size Jewish community, but the threat for whatever the size of the community is still there. And I think this is where you turn to your state leaders. And we have a particularly good group of state leaders here, people like Shelley Mayer, who serves in the Senate seat that I served in, Amy Paulin, a number of other individuals who really do understand how you can shape state policy to work in those areas where you don't have the same degree of effort. But I think the difficult part is to be proactive, not reactive. There's a tendency in government, maybe in life in general, but certainly in my experience in government, is until the crisis happens, then we start to say, oh, we could do this, and we should have done this, and we could have avoided this had we done this. It's to stay proactive in advance and to have those conversations and to put things into place before the crisis comes to pass. And I think that's something that the state, as they did by requiring us to analyze police reform and so forth, the state could easily require the same, effort from all the counties of New York State and the municipalities of New York State to give proactive studies and reports about how we intend to deal with security. And I think in this regard, protecting synagogues and churches and mosques all come from the same source, that people have a right for freedom of religion and to feel safe when they practice the religion of their choice. And in that regard, we could all do better. And, as I said, when I talk to Laura, we sort of exchange information, and she tells me something she's doing that we may not be doing, and we do the same. But I can't honestly say I talk to my counterpart in Chemung County very much, or in Broome County, So we have to have a standard that's across the board if we want this state to be a leader, in protecting the community.
Thank you. Not everyone here would have had the opportunity to tune into your State of the County address. So I'm going to just switch gears.
Listen to all of it, I might add.
Right.
It's kind of long.
But switching gears a little bit, I know you talked somewhat about COVID recovery. Feels like we're beginning to emerge from this dark period in our lives, and it's completely upended our lives. And I'm interested to hear what you can tell us about how the COVID recovery is going and how the vaccine efforts are going. Just kind of bring us up to speed on that.
Sure. Well, assuming that you don't want to listen to the hour, 20-minute speech that I gave, and I don't know if my dear mother, if she were alive, would want to sit down through all hour and 20 of it, but we tried to be as comprehensive for the sake of the Board of Legislators. On the COVID front, the news is good. Our infections, active cases right now, just above 600 active cases countywide. Back in the middle of January, we had 11,500 active cases. So that's a huge drop in the spread of infection. The other day, we had 18 new cases of COVID. We've had days where we've had, 500 new cases of COVID and then 500 the next day. Our hospitalizations now are below 60 countywide. At our peak this year, we had almost 600. And in the peak last year, we had 1,200 people hospitalized. That means the depth of their illness. And so less than 60 now. The fatalities have accumulated. 2,200 plus individuals have lost their life to COVID in the county. In the last week, we've lost 7 people, and we've had weeks like that recently where we've had under 10 people lost a week. Every death is a tragedy. I mean, somebody lost a spouse, somebody lost a brother, a neighbor, a friend, someone that they loved, and these people were loved. But we were at points during the peak periods last year where we could not handle the amount of fatalities that we were having every night. 60 people dying one night, 45 people the next night. I never thought when I ran for this job that I would have to sit around the table and discuss how we were going to buy refrigerator trucks to handle excessive numbers of those who had died. That was an inconceivable thought to me. And yet we sat around this conference table in the room next to mine discussing how best to handle that, because the system never anticipated these many fatalities, civilian fatalities. So we're through the...
George, you just muted yourself.
Okay, I didn't do anything.
There you go.
The vaccination numbers are good. For Westchester, we are approaching 60% with one shot, over 50% fully vaccinated. We've now been making an outreach to young people that have been made eligible for vaccinations, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds. We're in New Rochelle High School today. We're in other high schools over the last couple of weeks. We're getting to the point on the vaccination where we see ourselves being able to be over 60%, probably 65% fully vaccinated, but we're bumping into a number of people in which we now will reach that point at which people do not want to be vaccinated. It's not a question of access to vaccinations. I mean, there's still ways to go, but you'll get to a point where people just refuse to be vaccinated for one reason or another. There's some handful that may have legitimate health issues, but for the vast majority of it, some combination of general fear, it could be ideology. There are people who just don't think that this pandemic was serious enough to warrant the societal response to it, and they refuse to be vaccinated. So we'll see how far we can get. In Westchester, we're doing better than a lot of other places. And, you know, I credit the population. We have a well-educated population here, people who understand things and so forth. Now, all of that is toward opening up more of the society. You will see a more open, inclusive society for the rest of the spring, the summer, and the fall. You know, we're going to open Playland, which we did not do last year. We're going to have concerts in the park and Harrison and Mount Kisco and other places, which we did not have last year. Our masking policy, if you're double vaxxed, is less restrictive than it has been before. You still have to wear it if you're in a public transit, if you're in a hospital or a school, but it's not a universal requirement now. So I think, Lisa, the news is at this point, because of the vaccinations, we're not only getting better, we think this is a trend of getting better, not just a blip. And we'll find out as we reach the fall. And we'll also find out if medical science requires us to get a booster shot. And if that's required, the vast majority of us will do that. And hopefully, we'll get back to something that looks almost like normal.
Yeah, I do think that it's going to take some time. We may have to live with this for a while, but certainly now that the weather is turning warm, we can behave a little bit more like we did last summer, where we were able to have dinner outside and see friends and start to feel a little bit normal again. We also, we know that where the county made the decision to cancel all of the ethnic festivals this summer. I know we're doing some type of virtual, but I assume since they start, the schedule starts as early as June, that we weren't ready to open up again.
Yes, we unfortunately, we canceled them all last year. We've canceled them again this year. So we expect next year we'll have bigger, better of these things. What we did last year particularly, and as well this year, is we did not make a decision ideologically to cancel everything or to have everything happen. And we looked at each recreation function, each governmental function, and we tried to make the assessment, could we manage it? Could we, using social distancing, could we, by throwing bodies at it, or wear appropriate technology, could we restructure the way something worked to try to keep as much open as we could? Some of these decisions were relatively easy. Golf is a naturally socially distant sport. You don't cover somebody in golf as a defensive player. You give them wide berth to play the game. You put one person in a golf cart and you space them out in the golf pro window when they're coming to sign in, and you can function golf. Basketball, not too much. So, we took hoops down, and somebody would say, oh, you're letting the rich men play golf, but you're not letting the poor kids play basketball. It had nothing to do with ideology. It had to do with the intrinsic nature of the sport and whether or not you were close enough to somebody else to transmit the virus. So we were able to figure out how to socially distance and open pools and beaches last year. And this year we have higher capacities allowed by the state. States allowed us to open the Playland, so that's all good. But the festivals generally are wonderful because it's a big crowd. and we see dance and we see singing and there's food and vendors and we're up close and personal with each other. And, I can only point to about 2 ethnicities in my own life. I'd like to claim an ethnicity of everybody, but there's 20 or so of these things and they're great fun. I would obviously would go to all of them. And so we just felt that would be the most difficult thing to try to manage. So that's why we didn't do it this year, but next year.
Next year, we will hopefully be fully back in business next year. I think that given what we saw a year ago spring with New Rochelle being an epicenter of the New York COVID cases, I think we took it more seriously here in Westchester than a lot of other places. We were early on taking this very seriously. And I think people's behavior had a really positive effect on how we've been able to emerge from this. So,
and Lisa, if I can just add to this. So when the first cases came in New Rochelle, Lawrence Garbus, we know was patient 0, and as he functioned when he was sick but didn't realize he had COVID, nobody did, and he was at events in his community and then to Lawrence Hospital. This thing, sort of sprung on us. We saw it on television in Wuhan and in Lombardy, Italy. And the next thing we see, it's in New Rochelle, New York. Noam Bramson, the mayor, and I got together like right off the bat, and we started talking about what could we do in concert. Ron Burton lives right in the area that was zoned off by the governor. And we started to try to figure out how do we handle this. So it hit us without any game plan. There was nothing I could go to the file and pull out a similar thing that happened back in the 40s or the 80s and then follow the game. We built the plane as we were flying it. And except for the fact that we lost.
You just got muted again.
I thought we showed great flexibility trying to figure it out as we went along. And we made mistakes. I mean, there's no question as I look back on it. If I understood it, I think we would have imposed mask requirements sooner in the process than we did. We went a good amount of time in March not realizing we should have been doing that. And, some events were allowed that probably shouldn't have been. But in the bottom line, I think we ultimately responded well. And I hope that's how we're going to get out of it.
So in terms of the economic recovery and the budget impact, I know New York State certainly incurred costs that weren't anticipated in their budget, but maybe you can talk a little about Westchester specific.
It's very interesting because where we are today economically is counterintuitive. And if we were doing this Zoom a year ago today, I could not have foreseen that we would be in as good fiscal shape as we are today. At my State of the County message, I announced that we will have more money in our fund balance, which is our savings account, basically for the county than we've ever had before. How could that be? We
lost your sound again.
I don't know what's happening. It's just whenever I go mute, I'll unmute it.
Okay.
But my hands are on the wheel, officer. But we thought we were going to have a budget gap about 150 million when we did the projections of revenue, and a number of things happened that put us in a better shape. Certainly, we had federal money last year, and certainly a lot more this year, and that is a major deal, a major difference. We did a voluntary separation incentive where we gave an incentive reason for those who wanted to leave government service to do so with a cash payout. The transaction allowed us to reduce our workforce by 5%. The individuals did it voluntarily, and they made a chunk of dough when they walked out the door, but we still made money on it because they left the payroll, and we saved a significant amount, millions of dollars of savings. We had, credit, my county attorney, John Nona, and our director of operations, Joan McDonald, and a couple of other department heads. They did some negotiations. We redid the Liberty Lines contract for the bus system, the Wheelabrator contract for our burn plant. Saved 20 million here. We saved 17 million there over a number of years. And all of a sudden, the picture started to look a lot better. And, so now we're able, we believe if projections hold, we'll cut county property taxes for a third straight year. And we'll be able to have money in a bank. So it was surprising how it worked out. And again, the federal government was absolutely critical to all of this. But fiscally, we've survived. And I think you've seen as well, the Westchester real estate market is hot. If anybody puts their house on the market, assuming you've got, a decent piece of land and a community that has certain advantages, it's going like that. And so our property tax revenue stream stayed stable. We did better in mortgage recording tax than we thought. Sales tax was under what we originally projected in the 2020 budget, but it got better as the year went along. And we were able to use resources to help small businesses with grants. We put money into food security, help with feeding Westchester and local food pantries. We had money set aside in case of eviction prevention. Didn't happen to happen last year, but we were ready for it. And, we were able to get through this thing pretty well.
That's really remarkable. Thank you so much. You're getting a lot of props here in the chat. I have to at least read this one to you. We're lucky to have a county executive and law enforcement community who cares what is being done to educate both kids and adults and maybe connect different groups to gain understanding of each other. You've really been an incredible leader throughout this process.
If I just may, though, I appreciate those comments, but I will tell you something I learned a long time ago in business, and I did have, you have to read the resume to see it. I actually had a business career for 20 years besides the public career. And what I saw when I was a junior executive at senior executives is the most important thing an executive has to do is hire good quality people. You cannot do it by yourself. This may seem, counterintuitive, but most elected executives have a problem with this. You are not automatically the smartest man in the room because you won an election. And I understood those things, and I understood them well enough to get some really terrific people to work in the administration. And for those of you who followed Westchester for a while, if you noticed, I did not mass fire all of the commissioners that I inherited from my predecessor. I walked in the door and I kept a large number of them. Rabbi was one of them, and there's others. And why did I do that? Because they were talented professionals. You don't throw people out the door for political reasons if they're doing a good job running their department. Michael Orth is a fabulous director of community mental health. The programs he's worked with people, and many of you in not-for-profit world know what Michael's done. Charlita Amler, our commissioner of public health, I inherited when I walked in the door, and we kept her, and look what a great job she did and her team. So some of these basic management things, which you learn in business, if you apply them in government, and my political affiliation, you generally, when you look at somebody in my party, you say, watch out for those guys. They're going to raise taxes. They're going to be a little off the deep end. And that wasn't the way we played it. So I'm fortunate, and any credit that I get in the chat room, I'm going to make sure I share it with the people who have done a great job, the people who set up the county center vaccination place or the community college vaccination place, the people that responded, when we had Hurricane Isaias come through the county and detach people from their electricity, and it had to be reattached. I'm going to make sure those people get the credit because those are the people that have done yeoman's work.
Okay, now Ron Burton, your buddy Ron Burton, wants to know what the next chapter for you is. Well, you're not leaving.
No, well, I'm running for re-election. And when I speak about next year we're going to do this, there's a presumption that I shouldn't make. I know too well that elections have consequences, and so I'm running for re-election to serve another 4 years as county executive. We did put in and it was my direction. You might think I'm crazy to have done this, but we put in at my suggestion a 2-term limit for county executives. And I did that because I have concern over runaway executive power. I see it in some contexts, and I really think that, if you come into a job and you have some drive and determination, do as much as you can. 8 years is a good amount of time for you to be able to have your personality and your imprimatur on the government, but then you ought to have somebody else be able to do that. And I think that it also reflects the fact that there's political volatility out there. I'm not telling you what you don't know. We've seen friends serve in office for a long time, and then up comes an election and they're not in that office anymore. And it's happened more frequently in the last few years than it's happened before then. So recognizing that, you accept the fact that your time is limited, and there's a clock in my head, and it's click, 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 click. How much can we do while we have this authority? Because before you know it, click, somebody else is going to be sitting in this very chair. And I will be outside that door waiting for permission to enter this room to see the 10th county executive or the 11th county executive, since I'm the 9th. So bottom line is, what comes next, Ron? I don't know. I'll buy you a cup of coffee at the luncheonette over in Wackygill, and we'll go from there. We'll see what you think. But, you know, I don't want to be political, but I am on the ballot for re-election this year.
Well, we certainly thank you so much for your leadership and for your time today. These have indeed been unprecedented and challenging times, but we're truly grateful to be guided by thoughtful and competent leaders in New York State and here in Westchester. And now I'm going to turn it over to the council's CEO, Elliot Forchheimer.
So can I be heard? Is my
Yes,
headset
you can.
working? Great. So we've had more presidents at the council than we've had county executives, but we've had less council execs than we've had county executives. So, and I agree with you, Mr. County Executive. You want to turn over leadership. What you said earlier on is so true. When you were elected as one, we had no idea, number one, what a great resource you'd be to all citizens of the county, but the team you assembled, I don't want to mention names, but every commissioner, all of your aides, we've never had such accessibility and service and care. So really want to thank everybody in the administration, not to mention the Board of Legislators, which I know is a different branch, and of course the judicial as well. We are so blessed. I want to say that. And I want to go out there, George, and give you something which you might never have had. My wife warned me about doing this, but I'm going to go against her warning. In Judaism, one does not have to be a clergy person to give a blessing. Anybody can give a blessing. And when one meets a king, we give them a blessing because we believe that God has shown honor on a person. So on behalf of the council, we want to, I'm going to share a blessing. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has bestowed honor on you, our county executive. You brought such honor to yourself, to our county, and as such to all citizens. So I cannot thank you enough professionally and personally on behalf of all of us here today and all good citizens. So thank you, Mr. County Executive.
And thank you all again so much for joining us. Please continue to be cautious, stay safe, get vaccinated, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you all very much. It was a pleasure. And we'll see you in person. I'm sorry.
I just don't know where we can replace that. Where are you now? Right now I have